Hi, my name is William Chang, and today I'm going to talk about the Watts riots, which occurred in 1965 in the neighborhood of Watts in Los Angeles. There were many indirect factors that led to the riots, and one powder keg that exploded that led to the riots in Watts, Los Angeles. So, the background. In the Jim Crow South after the Civil War, many African Americans had suffered under the Southerners that sought to repress their rights and to make their lives hard as possible, which many did not really tolerate, and the so-called Great Migration occurred in the 1910s to other urban centers in the north and west of the United States seeking a better life. Even though they traveled to those new areas, their lives did not dramatically improve than what they once were in the South. Many things such as racism plagued their new lives, such as not being able to go to the same stores and restaurants as white people, and they were segregated in neighborhoods and other areas, such as the South. But one positive thing to note is that they weren't being seeked out and killed like in the South due to small things such as whistling at a woman and other such minor occurrences. However, towards World War II, a second wave of migration happened from the Jim Crow South, where over hundreds of thousands of African Americans migrated to California, such and to other cities in California, such as San Francisco and Los Angeles. They were to take the housing of Japanese people that were interned in camps during the World War II. So the prelude of the riots were that in 1963, the Lunsford Fair House Act was passed to prevent homeowners and renters, or landlords, I mean, to basically stop them from discriminating against African Americans when such legislation in the past in the state of California was already there, but this made it possible to sue and other things that could happen afterwards. However, the year afterwards, in 1964, the the Proposition 14 was proposed to repeal the Lunsford Fair House Act because white people felt threatened that the African Americans were getting more rights, and that progress simply seemed unfathomable at the time. It passed in November of 1964, where over 56% of voters voted in support of Proposition 14. It led to deep resentment in the Watts community and other factors during this time, such as the racist police force, which sought to target African Americans and other minorities in the area, led to continued resentment and the fact that police owners and other people in power could deny housing and other services to African Americans made them more resentful of the situation they were in. And the power keg that would explode would happen on August 11th, 1965, where an African American named Marquette Fry was arrested for supposedly erratic driving by the police. The details are sketchy on the encounter itself, but according to Marquette Fry and his her half brother that was there in the car a decade after in the interview. Uh, the police officers tried to arrest Marquette for the erratic driving, which he resisted because he was fearful of what would happen to him. Because, as we know, the police force wasn't the most unbiased there was, and his half brother joined in to not only protest the arrest but also to make sure he wasn't harmed. And somehow the word came out, and his mother and their mother came over to the scene, which led to a crowd also arriving to the scene and witnessing the violent arrest, which greatly enraged the people at the scene. And the crowds just continued to grow and grow, and more police officers were dispatched to the area. And then the riots occurred as the tensions grew so much that conflict arose where rioting and looting occurred. Surprisingly, the casualties to the police were mostly due to friendly fire or indirectly by the protesters or and rioters. They weren't direct uh, shootings by rioters towards the police or any other officials. It's, another thing to note is that during the riots and the response was seemed like uh, very confrontational as the police chief, William Parker, sought to get the National Guard to help repress the riots, which by the end numbered over 15,000 National Guard members that had arrived onto the scene. The riots were lasted 5 days, and over $30 million of damage was dealt with to property, and over 34 people lost their lives, including 3 police officers. 1,032 injuries were reported and 3,438 were arrested. It is to note that during the riots, the news coverage was pretty sketchy, and most did not report the events that happened at Los Angeles for whatever reason, due to how many other events that possibly could have happened during that time that made it seem like it wasn't a major event, and as such, it was not well documented to what events exactly occurred at Los Angeles during the riots. Some tried to find sources such as from the police officers, but some knew that obviously they were pretty biased, and the police chief himself was uh, supportive of the repression, which, although ended the riots, it had a consequential note that how his police force, due to their racist and bigoted ways, led to such a riot to occur. The rioters themselves wanted just equal rights and all the stuff that was being preached by, at that time, by Martin Luther King Jr. And after the riots in 1967, the California Supreme Court repealed Prop 14 due to the fact that it was unconstitutional, and reinstated the Rumford Fair Housing Act due to how it violated the equal rights of African Americans compared to other people in the area. And the broken system actually continued throughout the country, where even today African Americans do not have the same basic treatment and rights as other white people in this country. And it's just such as increased incarceration rates and more people just suffering under poverty and less job opportunities if they are released from jail due to the stigma of hiring felons into the job market.